Hi chess friends, this is King's Executor covering round 9 of the Candidates Tournament 2013, and it's not a Carlsen game. I want to focus on Carlsen because I predicted him to be the winner, and he's leading now with 6 points out of 9. But this is a game from round 9 which is quite complex. I mean, it's overwhelmingly complex and deep, and it's really messy. Probably the most complex game I analyzed on this channel. So first of all, you're invited to subscribe to this channel and comment to this video and share your thoughts. So let's get started. This is Peter Svidler against Alexander Grischuk, and Svidler again played his Saemisch setup against the King's Indian, and well, you see that the theme in this opening is just to pressurize the d4 square and to force a concession out of white. Knight e2 to again cover e4 and developing. And the drawback of this whole opening for white is of course that he's a little bit slow with his kingside development. f3 is taking away the natural square for the knight, and the knight here blocks in that bishop. So the knight has to move again sooner or later to free this bishop. So this opening is rather slow, and you really have to know exactly what you're doing. After knight c6, the main move, d5 gaining space, and from round 3, from the game Svidler against Radjabov played knight a5 here, and then knight g3 covering c4 with the bishop. I covered that game, but in this game Grischuk played e4 against Svidler, and again knight to g3 here, covering c4, and this knight can sometimes help to push these pawns against the king's side. h5 to make use of this funny located knight here, and you see black is already castled. Black is kinda ahead in development. Bishop e2 and h4, well, looks very bad for white. Knight back to f1. So the knight made 1, 2, 3 moves to get back to the back rank. And what would you do as black in this position? Just a very normal strategical idea. e6 as Grischuk played. I mean, the white king is still stuck in the center, in the middle of the board, and you want to open up the game because black is castled, and you want to mate white, and yeah. So f4, kicking that knight. I think the most natural move here would be knight to g4. Looks like black is losing a piece here, but it's not so. If we take that knight, takes, queen takes, and pawn takes, opening up fire against the queen with tempo. You see now after the queen retreats, black has d4, gaining back a piece. Knight d5, pawn takes, and now b2 is under fire, so castles should be played here to cover that pawn, and e2 to distract the white queen, and rook e8 now to to oppose the queen. This looks like a position which is very sharp, and the question is that pawn weak and lost? Is black more easy to attack? Or is white easier to attack? So let's get back to this position, and so knight g4 would be a possible move. But Grischuk came with knight takes c4. That knight was taken, of course. And now b5. Well, this looks like losing for black, but black's idea is to sacrifice temporarily sacrifice material to activate his pieces and make use of the white king in the middle of the board. That pawn was taken. Now e takes d, and in this position there are different possibilities. If you were white, I think you would be really scared what to do now. The game's opening up, your king hasn't castled, and you're quite under some pressure in the center. Now again, d4 is threatening, gaining back the piece. So you can take on d5, then rook b8, and you see the b2 pawn is indirectly attacked. The bishop on e3 isn't covered as well, so queen d2 looks like a sensible move. But then knight takes d5. The idea is, well, black gains back a pawn. He's preparing, well, he cannot play rook e8 because of this bishop, but that bishop can be taken, and if the knight recaptures, let's just take away this arrow. If the knight recaptures, then rook e8, and the bishop is pinned. But the strongest ideas here actually is simply to take off that knight, either with the bishop or the knight, which is defending the bishop. That would lose back one piece from the white side. So queen takes d5 is a good move here for white, and if bishop takes and the rook can take on b5, well, white would have to get castled. Rook e8, well, king f2 to cover e3, but white here is up a knight. The question is his king safe enough? And well, I think if white consolidates, he should be winning this. Let's get back to this position. So white could have taken on e5 here, but Svidler chose e5. Well, if d4 is threatening, he's threatening f6 to take on f6. And now pawn takes pawn, so the threat is gone for the moment, and again d4 is coming. Pawn takes pawn. Well, this is a very messy position, very sharp. In this position, Grischuk played bishop g4. Let's look at other options. If d4, attacking or forking the two pieces, and bishop g5, pinning the knight to the queen, then bishop g4, well, then white can take on f6, and the best is just to take f6 with the bishop. Then queen takes bishop, pawn takes knight, pawn takes bishop, pawn takes pawn, rook b1, and now the final idea of the combination is queen a5 check, and queen takes bishop. Now the threat is that white takes on h4 with the queen, and then queen h6, and then mate. But queen takes h4 is answered by queen b6, and then queen h6 isn't possible because then the queen takes the pawn here. So knight a3, and funnily enough, black can get out of this, being down a knight with c4. And really best is just to take that pawn with the queen, but queen g5, well, c4 was distracting the queen from the coverage of g5. Well, if white wants to get consolidated here and castle by hand, then rook a d8, and look how strong white's pressure is here. Rook d2 check and king g1 would mean that the knight here is lost. So there are two moves. If queen c3, then rook fe8, with the idea just to sacrifice the rook on e3, and if the queen takes, then rook d2 check with the same idea, even threatening mate. After king g1, queen g2 checkmate. So the queen would have to sacrifice on d2. I hope you can imagine it. So there's a lot of pressure against white. This pawn is really a bone in white's throat. So if rook takes pawn, and just to indirectly cover this mating attack, black still can take on e3. Queen takes, and now queen takes f6 check would regain the rook. So very long and complicated variations here. Let's just get back to this position. But this is what the players had to go through. I mean, this pawn to c4 idea beforehand was really a computer move. It's impossible to find over the board, I believe. But this is what black could have up his sleeve. It's really phenomenal. Knight g4 would be the best move in this position. Covers f6, and after check, there is no queen g2 mate, but then queen d2 check, and rook d4 wins the knight. And if white tries check, and of course the queen cannot take this, or else the queen wins the rook here. So king h7 and queen b3. Now the queen can take this, and after rook b2, rook f4, black is back in the game, and it's rather a drawish position. So that would happen after, let's go back to this position. This is the game position. If d4 was played, black could get out of it with bishop takes, and then this magical move c4 here. And this is practically impossible to find. Let's go back in this position just to cover it. if bishop takes, this is worse, way worse. And you see in this position, white is under no pressure whatsoever and winning this. Very complex. So d4, to find the solution for d4 and the continuation is practically impossible. So it's understandable why Grischuk played bishop g4. And the engines would say that white is way better here, but if you play this position on, you really understand that it is not so good for white. If queen a5 here and d4, now we can take on f6, and well, that's Zwischenzug with bishop c6, and if rook c8, h3, it's really messy. Rook d1, queen b6, and knight d4 attacking the bishop, bishop g7, and this is a rather equal position now. The point is that the two bishops are attacked. Well, and it's really difficult, I think, for white foremostly. Let's go back to this position. Instead of bishop c6, white could have gone knight e4, attacking the bishop and getting out of the attack from the pawn. And then black has this nice move, has a Zwischenzug h3, threatening a fork on g2. Bishop f4, getting out again of the attack from this pawn. Takes, takes, check, check. Well, would you like to play this position as white? After f5? This is what has to go through your mind. It's really difficult to play queen a4 and get into this trouble. So we cannot blame Svidler to take on f6 here with the pawn. Bishop takes queen, and now we get a very unimbalanced position here. h3 again threatening the fork. This is the game continuation. And rook takes d1. The pieces are forked. And now look at this position. I cannot remember a resembling position from a Grandmaster game. You see the two rooks from both sides are the counterparts, and then we have these three pieces for the queen. So it should be equal, but how about the dynamics? Can black do something with white's open king? Queen h4 was played, rook g2 covering everything, rooks into the middle, rook d4 gaining a tempo, and rook f4 with the idea just to bring that bishop to d4 and dominate the dark squares. And if white manages this, say for example rook here, and rook here, well, if black isn't careful, that means mate. The other way would be to play this way, rook takes, and rook g7. Well, it's really tough if you allow that, so this is why Grischuk played d4, a very nice practical move. That pawn was taken, and not allow white to dominate the dark squares, Grischuk took that bishop off. Rook b8 and a4, a6. That pawn is taken. And I think Grischuk missed a move here, which should be very good for him. Queen e5. Just a Zwischenzug, gaining a tempo to get to this nice square, f6 with check, winning the bishop. I think this position is way better for black. I mean, white has these two pawns, but I think the coordination of the white pieces in conjunction with this open king is bad. So this should have been the best continuation, I believe. But instead, Grischuk played queen f3 check, queen h1 check, and rook takes pawn. Rook d2, queen c1, and king d3. From now on, white seems to consolidate. Rook b6 and rook d6 check. Bishop d5. And now you see it's hard to get through as black. f5, rook d4. So white is in a sort of a castle position in the middle of the board. He's quite safe. And these pawns really hold everything together. If they weren't on the board, I think these pawns would be winning. King h6. And white maybe should have tried a5, which Svidler didn't do. But I think black gets into trouble now. If rook a7 to stop the pawn. Rook a4. Well, if black has to push his pawns, a6, and after a move like f4, bishop b7, and now this rook is out of the game. And I think black is really struggling to get back into the game after this. It looks frightening for white with his pawns, but they are going nowhere. Rook a5 with the idea just to bring that rook to this file and stop the pawn. Queen g1. This is just a variation which white could have played. And now the knight covers f2 and attacks g5. Queen e3 could be a move here. If rook e5 then, very strong. I think black cannot find a way through. Check. And if black doesn't want to get mated very soon, so maybe he would have to go to h5 with his king, but then check, and rook e4 wins the queen. So this is a variation which could occur after pawn to a5, because that pawn would kinda pin this rook and hold it there to stop the pawn from promoting. But h4 by Svidler. Rook c7 attacking the knight, bishop c4 interfering, queen f1 check, and f4, king c2, f3, and in this position they agreed a draw, remarkably enough. Let's see why. For example, rook to e4, and if check and f2, rook f4. In conjunction with the bishop, f1 is covered, so if black would intend to sacrifice the exchange, check. Well, this position is a draw. Why it is a draw? King gets out of checks. These pawns can be exchanged, and after that white doesn't have enough coordination to push the pawn, because black can find checks all the time, and this is a clear draw for grandmasters. So in this position, let's get back to the last game position. Both players agreed to a draw. Let's just recap the game very quickly without the variations. So Svidler played the Saemisch again in the 9th round, as he did in the 3rd. And now we have the difference. Instead of knight a5, knight e5 is answered by the same move, knight g3 and h5. Well, is there another move for black here? Black maybe could have tried to simply open up the queen side to prepare these pawn pushes with rook here, bishop here, something like that. h5 was Grischuk's choice, and now white wants to get castled. h4, okay, that kicks the knight back, but maybe that pawn is weak. e6 to open up the game while the white king is in the middle, and now white has to push to gain some time. And now we have this interesting and very sharp sacrifice. e5. Well, I don't know how much of this is theory. I doubt that this is mainline theory. I really doubt it. Bishop g4. I mean, it's incredible that both players didn't blunder. They could have tried maybe more lines with more chances, but they're incredibly difficult to find. Maybe in the end the pawn push to a5 was easy to find. I don't know, maybe time pressure was the reason why white didn't push the pawn in this position to a5. So the black rook has to stay on a7, and white would have a free hand then. h4 instead. And now it is a draw. Both players now played accurately, and sorry, I was too fast. In this position they agreed to draw. So I hope you like this game. I hope you don't mind the very big amount of deep variational analysis. This is really a special game, and it's really worthwhile to go through these variations. There are even more. I mean, this is so complex and so sharp, and I think there should be more games like this. Don't you think too? Thanks for watching. Please comment, subscribe, and rate the video if you liked it. See you next time. Thanks.